Servus! Konnichiwa! Im letzten Part haben wir den Kampf gegen Alice Kuonji abgeschlossen und Flatznag. Und konnten bewundernswert sehen, wie Aoko den Cell-Touch machte und den guten Mond abgeschossen hat. Einfach eine epische Szene. Und der Soundtrack war auch episch. Wow, wir haben schon fast den ganzen Soundtrack angehört. Und ich muss sagen, ich hätte gern sowohl Flatznag als auch Alice in Fake Order. Und ich würde mal sagen, dass ich jetzt genug geredet. Wir setzen mal fort. Mit Kapitel 6. Like a Dog. Next episode. Chapter 6. Like a Dog. He was still in a deep sleep. It all seemed ablaze in a mad fiery red. Unbearable, idle thoughts. Insane obstinacy. Melancholy sights and gloomy bittersweet talk. Fickle wickedness, born of human interaction. Namely, the voice of a forsaken coexistence. This, however, was the scenery of a world far removed from that. If there were those praying this was paradise, then there were likely also those lamenting it is as the underworld. In a decade, or perhaps longer, this would all change, but for now, the autumn leaves remained yet untrampled by human souls. It was scenery he knew very well. Life in the mountains was humble and modest. There were no conspicuous buildings among the wilderness he called home. They gathered and stockpiled only what they needed to surviving without pillaging the land. Serpentine trails could be seen woven through the fields, and the stone slabs leading to the summit were obscured by the forest, only visible upon them. The mountain inhabitants probably intended it that way. There was no sign of mankind exploration among the mountain landscape. He suddenly remembered that this was the season he liked the most, or rather, it suited him the most. There was much to be done to prepare for winter, but whenever he had a free moment, he would make his way towards the mountain top, gazing idly at the setting sun, while breathing deep the crisp autumn. air was probably the second favorite of his daily choice. It relaxed him, the cold but comforting wind at dusk, and the way the sunset dyed the peaks of vibrant crimson. Not 2 months had passed since coming down from the mountains, and already it pained him that the memories had begun to fade. Someone once told him that memories fade every day, so the best you want to do is make as many new ones as possible. Das klingt irgendwie falsch, dieser Satz. So the best you want to do is. So, ich würde eher schreiben, the best you can do is as many as possible. Recollections grew hazy. A new place to live meant the beginning of a new life. He wasn't sure if he was reluctant to let go of the scenery he had cherished for so long, or if he had merely been spoiled by it. Despite his new home in a city surrounded by tall buildings, he felt guilty for wanting those memories alone to remain clear in his mind. Either way, he had to make the best of a fresh start. What kind of man thinks more about where he came from than where he's going? He contemplated.
そうか。これ、夢だ。
Yep, du träumst. He tried to stop himself from indulging in uncharacteristic sentimentality. It would be a dream if it was easy to understand. The moment he realized he was dreaming, angular shadows began to rise from the autumn colors. There were concrete buildings previously unknown and yet familiar to him. At the same time, this was how his current life was washing away his memories. Struggle as he might, there was no stopping the degradation of human memory or impressions. It was merely a fact of life. By nature, humans lived in the present over the past. Eventually, even his most cherished memories would be swallowed up the buildings. It was neither cruel nor heartless. If they were sure to disappear, then for now he would content himself with dreaming about the memories he could clearly recall. Whether in the mountains or in the city, the days flew by. Yesterday's scenery was not the same as today's. And such, a red demon appeared. She had given him no time to grieve. This nostalgia was beautiful, but that made it fleeting.
土産入道じゃないんだぞ、青崎。
Miyagi Nyodo? Ich frage mich, was dieses Miyagi Nudo heißen soll. Sorry, aber das muss ich googeln. Miyagi Nudo. Ah, das ist ein Yokai. Miyagi Nudo is a type of yokai told about on Sado Island. In the Niigata prefecture. They are a type of Mikoshi Nudo. When climbing a small slope at night, something talking on the appearance of a little bozo would appear in front of, and by looking up it would become taller and the person looking at it would fall down backwards. It said that by chanting Miyagi Nudo, I've seen past you, and lying down towards, it will disappear. In Hamochi, Sado district, now a part of Sado, it said that Miyagi Nudo that appears at a place called Tsujido would steal food and money from travelers. Ah, interessant. Und auch interessant, dass er Aoko Aosaki als Yokai sieht. A faint dizziness made him close his eyes. With outside, the mountain's landscape vanished, but in its place a familiar voice could be heard. It was a booming voice that seemed to shake not only the mountainside he stood upon, but the entire mountain as well. And of course, Arosaki reappeared, towering in the distance. He must have been tired. He thought of diagnosing himself while trying to make out what she was saying. Fearing the vertigo would return if he reopened his eyes, he decided to keep them closed. It sounded like she was arguing with someone, though the tone was all he could make out. It wasn't violent, but certainly aggressive. Maybe she was picking a fight with another mountain across the way. He wouldn't put it past her. After all, she was a troublemaker who blew up the moon. Just like Zeltrek. He couldn't progress the conversation. Though, somehow vaguely he had the sense that his human rights were being leisurely ignored. It was deeply unsettling even for a dream. After several minutes... Oh, Gott, einfach die besten Gesichter. It seems that the high-impact argument ended in Aoko's victory. Then suddenly, the boisterous voice faded. Praying everything would be back to normal, he opened his eyes. He took a deep, slow breath. The scenery was a far cry from the nostalgic dreamscape he had just left, albeit not unpleasant either. Without a doubt, it was the amusement park. To him, this was his freshest memory. He recalled the house of mirrors that Arosaki destroyed. This park was flawless replica of reality, but he was the only one there. Without having to worry about anyone chasing him, he sat down on the wreckage of Kisti's rise and looked up at the moon that should have been shut down. The winter moon shone white like a jewel. It was layered over the figure of the girl who tried to kill him. If a mage was a witch, then she definitely fit the bill. I don't mind being killed. Such an absurd thing to say, but it spilled out of him so naturally.
いやでも
That had nothing to do with witches or magecraft. There was an echo in the grasp of his heart. If she had not spoken those words, then he would have not responded as he did. In that moment, what did Arosaki say to him? As he tried to remember, his deep slumber drew to an end. And with it, his chance to find the answers he so wished he could find. Then, Soichiro woke up in an unfamiliar room, gasping. Not because the plush mattress he was on was softer than his apartment's cheap futon, or because everything from the carpet to the wallpaper looked expensive. Bewildered, he tried to catch his breath. It wasn't the cause of his surprise. The moment Soichiro's eyes snapped open, there she was, the girl dressed in black, sitting at his bedside. The silence was deafening. Still supine on the bed, Soichiro gazed at her. His impulse was to sit up, but he refrained, thinking it might be rude to be staring at the person sitting next to him. She was just sitting there, on a chair, dressed in black, modest clothes. Still, she projected an air that was anything but plain. Her monochrome outfit evoked indescribable elegance, like a costume handmade just for her, from the finest fabrics. It was enough to inspire poetic sentiments, even in Soichiro. The girl continued to sit completely motionless. Without realizing it, Soichiro had stopped breathing. Genuine astonishment had him captivated. Such beauty. It was the first time he had ever thought to use such a simple plain expression to describe another human being. She was the daffodil in perfect bloom, or the ideal female form, seen only in dreams. This quality was something to be cherished and admired in her. It was different from Aoko Arasaki's blindingly radiant vitality. After all, the flame that burns twice as bright burns half as long. And there was no way this girl would be allowed such a happy ending. Pardon? Her life was a solitary fable of someone who left the world in exactly the same way they entered it. Before humanity stolen at birth, there was an existence not of this world. The more beautiful something was, the more tragic its fate. Growing up in the mountains, this was not something Sojiro was taught, but something he learned from experience.
眠ってるみたいだ。
Sojiro turned his head, as though he was being lured in. He knew it was rude to stare, but he couldn't fight his instincts. Then... This time his heart actually skipped a beat. She was not asleep at all. Expressionless, she was merely watching over him while he recovered. Sojiro froze, unable to turn his head away or think of something clever to say. It was like staring into her eyes turned him to stone. Perhaps because of her delicate features, she looked somewhat younger than him. On the other hand, her tranquil expression made him feel like she was older. Jet black hair, just to her shoulders. Her large eyes were set like onyx stones, matching her hair. Devoid of emotion, the gaze stayed fixed on Sojiro. Even after their eyes met, she did not turn away. He wanted to speak, but could not find the words. It was not unlike a frog being stared down by a snake. Nevertheless, he just could not bring himself to say something. Additionally, no matter how carefully Sojiro might have been, he was painfully aware that this girl was as powerful as Aoko. Less talkative, to be sure, but still powerful. Objectively, this scene was not unlike that of someone nursing a bedridden stranger. He had no idea what she might have been thinking about. It seemed to him as this harsh silence might last forever. All he could say for sure was that the quiet did not appear to bother her in the slightest. It was like someone bizarre from a form of punishment. If this is some kind of test from Arasaki, he thought, keeping his eyes on the girl. He felt like the moment he turned his head or blinked, she might stab him in the chest with a hidden blade. And not because his imagination was running away with him. In the stifling silence, it was only natural that Sojiro would think back on what happened in the amusement park, and it made him uneasy. But stronger than any anxiety was his fascinating with the girl. Her slender frame and milky white skin, the chill of her guarded stare, the warmth of her lingering femininity. It was the mixture of those two later qualities that was almost magical. He stared at her for so long. He began to get the feeling that they had met somewhere before. Something before the conflict at Gitsy Land. He could not quite put his finger on it, but he was sure he had seen her previously.
その今更だけど
His voice shattered the frozen silence in the room. He almost felt sorry for making noise as he spoke out to her, but they could not very well just sit and stare at each other forever. Though he might have been the only one thinking they were staring, and perhaps she thought they were glaring at each other.
ここはどこで君は誰だかわかるかな
Berechtigte Fragen! She narrowed her eyes slightly, though apparently not out of offense. There was no response. Just as he was thinking it would have been better to keep quiet, she quietly raised her hand.
これあなたのでしょ
Her voice was cold but melodic. A white piece of cloth was wrapped in her fingers. There was no need to tell him what it was. He was conscious enough to recognize his own possessions. Tsuchiro sat speechless as she tossed it to him. Picking it up, he wrapped it around his neck.
青子はそれを知っているの？
He looked away in response to her blunt question. Distracted by something unrelated, she called Oko Osaki by her given name, which led him to believe that the mountain Oko had argued with in his dream was actually the girl beside him.
さあどうだろ
As sincerely as he could, he answered without presumption. There are things that should be known and things that need to be. There are also things that should be told and other things that must not be. Tsuchiro was not exactly sure what that she was referring to, however.
う。でもその方がいいとは思うよ。
He smiled slightly at her question, perhaps impressed by his response. The overwhelming pressure in the room dissipated noticeably. Or maybe she had been more nervous than he was the entire time. Projecting the image that this room was her domain a tad too strongly. This tension faded. Tsuchiro tried to sit up and prop his arms beneath him. Now that they were talking, it seemed awkward to stay lying down. However, his body felt strange as he tried to move, and it surprised him how difficult it was to sit up. It took everything he had just to raise his upper body to a sitting position.
あれ洋服のままだ。
As he threw the covers back, he tilted his head quizzically.
申し訳ない。こんないい布団なのにこれじゃ不釣り合いだ。というよりもったいない。
Zu höflich. She stared at him, not expecting him to complain about not wearing pajamas while sleeping. Someone appeared that he had done something to surprise her.
なんでだ何もしてないぞ俺。
Pointing a bit at the unwarranted curiosity, he turned to face her, although he was still mostly laying down. It was at least a more dignified position.
それでさっきの続きだけど。
Indeed, he needed to find out where he was and who she was before anything else. Actually, the more he thought about it what happened in the amusement park, the more he got a sinking feeling in his stomach. Perhaps finally getting through to her, she calmly moved her arm from behind her back when... Once again, they silently locked eyes. Thump, thump, thump. There was a startling sound of rapidly approaching footsteps. They both had a pretty good idea of who it was.
アリス、約束。
Just as expected, Oko Osaki burst through the door with a thunderous roar. She entered wearing her school uniform, her long hair flowing behind her. Her breath was heavy, and her throat was wrinkled by a skull, granting her a demonic appearance.
アリス。
This girl named Alice scolded slightly in response. She may have even let a sight of this point slip out.
早かったわね、青子。
Her calm voice was the polar opposite of Oko's. Needless to say, her voice dripped with brazen coldness.
そりゃあんたの性格は知り抜いてるからね。こういう時の短絡思考はこの2年で経験済みよ。お行儀がいいようで面倒になったらあっさり投げ捨てるのがあんたでしょ。
いやね、人聞きの悪い。
Effortlessly, she brushed aside Aoko's jab. In doing so, Shuchiro had the distinct impression that she no longer even realized he was in the room.
はん。それで今日まで何度煮え湯を飲まされたことか。青子に譲ると言ったけど、よく考えると面倒だから私の方で処理しておいたわ。なんて言い訳、もう聞き飽きたっつーの。
Oh man! Sorry, ich muss kurz schneuzen. So. Geschneit.
短期なのはそっちの自由だけど、それなら後の始末は相方に任せるのが最低限の筋ってもんじゃないの？
そうね。そうでなければ共闘している意味がないわ。まあ今後の方針を勝手に決めた人のセリフじゃないとは思うけど。
それもきっちり型をつけたでしょ？いい？勝ったのは私たちよ。逃げ切れば見逃してあげるって言ったのは誰？言動には責任を持ちなさい、アリス。それとも何？もしかして一番気に食わないのはそのあたりの理由なわけ？
Alice frowned slightly and fell silent. Her housemates seemed to have struck a nerve that Alice herself did not know was there.
とにかくこいつの扱いはちゃんと目が覚めて本人の意思でどうするか決めるまで保留ってことで合意したでしょ？人の留守中に出し抜くのはやめてよね。
それ、青子、学校はどうしたの？まだ正午になったばかりなの。
アリスのとこが今日で終わりって思い出して家庭の事情ってことで早退したのよ。期末試験前だってのにほんと何やってんのか。
Alka grumbled more to herself than anyone else in the room. Then she locked eyes with Alice, or more accurately, they glared daggers at each other. Best roommates ever, oder? The room had become tense once again, and it felt like a fight could break out at any moment, with no way to escape, so Shiro had no choice but to sit and watch. But then, the electric silence that seemed like it would last forever suddenly broke about a minute later. Apparently, the sort of clash was an everyday occurrence.
私は今に言っているから、彼に事情を説明してあげて。
Alice stood up from the chair and made for the door. Watching her go, Shiro cocked his head. In her hand was what could only be described as
果物ナイフ。
Die hat es wirklich vorgehabt! Had no words to describe the tool she was clutching.
アリス、あえて聞くけど、その手に持ってるの何？
Alko asked Alice as she walked past.
探検ね。どう見ても。
Alice answered expressionlessly before briskly walking out of the room. Ich liebe sein Gesichtsausdruck. Verdammte Scheiße, ich liebe diese VN einfach. Soichiro had thought it best not to think too deeply about the scenes he just witnessed. At any rate, the girl in black had withdrawn, and along with her the feeling of tension. Leaving our bedridden Soichiro alone with Aoko is still dressed for school. From Soichiro's perspective, this was a perfect chance to get answers to his ever-growing list of questions.
わけのわからないことだらけだ、青崎。
でしょうね。順序立てて説明してあげるからちょっと黙ってて。顔の麻痺も取れてるし呼吸も再開っと。これならもう安心かな。
She nodded as she took a seat.
どう調子は。
なんかだるい。
He answered meekly, dropping his shoulders. He opened and closed his left hand a few times, but moving his fingers felt slow and awkward. It was clear he was still in bad shape. Meanwhile, Oko was blinking her eyes in wonder. Or was it operation? Between Alice and Oko, Sochiro did not know which of the girls was the harder to read.
体が重いのは当然よ。丸2日経ってるし、寝てるだけでも体は弱ってるだろうし。でももう話せるくらい回復してるとは思わなかった。あんたって見かけより頑丈にできてるのね。
2日って？
あれからそれだけ経ってるの。学校には欠席届出しといたから、その点は安心して。ガンドの呪いもダンプティの呪いも私とアリスとで解除しといたから。
Sochiro nodded at the word curse, as if recalling it suddenly. It was all coming back to him now.
どうかした？そんな遠い目しちゃって。
ああ、忘れてた。それで2日も寝込んでたのか。怖いもんだな、呪われるってことは。
ほんと緊張感ないわね、あんた。銅のように眠ってたのが嘘みたいよ。下手すると一生あのまま石膏もどきだったかもしれないのに。
Wow!
ちょっと待った。今すごいこと言わなかったか？
言ったけど、引かぬが花よ。経緯はどうあれ、後でアリスにお礼を言っときなさい。私じゃ解除できなかったんだから。
ひどい花もあったもんだ。あ、けどアリスっていうのはさっきの子か？遊園地で俺たちを殺そうとした？
Oko replied it was.
彼女ずっとそこに座ってたけど、ここは彼女の部屋なのか？
Sochiro scanned the room again. He was not accustomed to sleeping on anything other than a futon, and the room looked especially foreign to him.
ここはただの客室。長いこと使ってなかったから埃だらけでしょ。それよりアリスと何か話したの？あなた。
Well.
いや、あれを会話というのはちょっと。
He brought his hand to his mouth and recalled a few words they exchanged. As Sochiro said, calling it a conversation would be a gross overstatement. And yet, thinking back on it, it seemed like they had talked for hours, which brought an uncomfortable smile to his face.
とはいえ、緊張は解けたと思うよ。青崎がやってくるのがもう少し遅かったらよかったのに。
Oko narrowed her eyes at his innocent slip of the tongue. She knew Sochiro did not mean to treat her like a nuisance, but nevertheless she found it hard to take the full brunt of his words said to her face. Even worse, she danced that she was getting used to his manner of speaking.
でもだからなのかもね。相変わらず首の皮一枚の人生を送ってるわ、あなたって。
Ja, das hatte und das Schiff die Leute das Shiro-Plot-Armor hätte. Dabei geht Shiro andauernd drauf. 40 Mann, um genau zu sein. Wobei... wahrscheinlich 38 Mann oder sowas, weil manche Bad Ends tut er auch als Vegetable überleben oder in der Puppe eingesetzt überleben als Ilias Plaything. He tilted his head, clearly confused.
だからあんたはよっぽどアリス好みの対応をしたのよ。まだ生きてるってそういうこと。
No matter how bad he tried, he could not grasp what she was getting at. He decided to change the subject for something else.
ところで、ここはどこなんだ？あの子に聞いても教えてくれなかったけど、青崎なら教えてくれるだろ。
ここは三崎町の幽霊屋敷よ。正確には不穏寺邸と言えばいいかしらね。さっきの子、不穏寺アリスの持ち家で私が住んでるところでもある。あの後あなたをここまで持ってきたんだけど覚えてないでしょ？
Something about the way she said that made me feel uncomfortable.
不穏寺っていう名前は聞き覚えがあるような。そうだ、よく商店街でおじさんたちが話してた。なんでも偉いお金持ちだとかなんとか。
それアリスの前ではご法度よ。穏便にここで暮らしたいならね。
Confused, Soichiro tilted his head for what seemed like the hundredth of time that day. And once again he had something to make him feel uneasy.
青崎、君今なんて言った？
しずきくん、私ね、あからさまな嘘を言う人と同じことを何度も言わせる人と察しの悪い人には容赦しないから。そのあたり覚えておいてね。ここで平穏に暮らしたいなら。
The best smile. Aoko made a threatening proclamation. Needless to say, it caught Soichiro completely off guard.
気のせいならいいんだけど、君の言葉には俺がここに住むような響きが感じられる。
He shot her an honest stare of disapproval. It was the best resistance he could muster, but it was not in the slightest effective against Aoko's overpowering, ruthless glare.
あなた、自分の立場は分かってる？
He
considered her words carefully. He wanted to openly express his feelings of the matter, but instead he swallowed his words and shook his head. Despite his stupid inability to read people's emotions, he at least seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. It appeared that he had finally realized that it was his carefree mood that typically got on Aoko's nerves.
ああ、そうだった。あんたに回りくどいこと言っても無駄だったのよね。いいわ。考える時間ぐらいあげたかったけど、時間もないし、はっきりと言ってあげる。いい？しずきくん。この度、あなたは私たちの監視下に置かれることになりました。しばらくはここで一緒に暮らしてもらいます。
Gibt schlimmere Leute, mit denen man zusammen wohnen müsste.
もちろん、生殺与奪の権利はこちらにあるという条件で。
The bellaternity in her voice caused him to sputter. He wished that she would stop smiling in an attempt to make it seem any less outrageous.
一緒に住むって青崎とか？
Sie steht richtig auf ihn. It was not the faint expectation of living under the same roof with Aoko that had him flustered. Never. He was genuinely concerned about his own safety. Regardless of how good-natured he was, it seemed he finally had come to grips with the fact that he just escaped death.
とんでもない。冬眠前の熊と一緒に暖を取るようなもんだ。
Okay, agreed. As a better compared to his boss.
たまには的確な比喩をするじゃない。あなたの言う通り、下手なことをしたり決まりを破ったりしたら、今度こそ息の根止めるからね。それと、ここに住んでるのは私とアリスの2人だけよ。あの子、私なんかより数倍常識ないから、気をつけないと死んじゃうぞ。
Aoko ist der Teufel. Aoko was 100% serious. It was her cynicism that made it all the more believable.
いや。
Obviously, there was no way the victor Soichiro could accept these terms.
待ってくれ。俺にはちっとも青崎がわからない。監視するって言うけど、なんでそんな話になってるんだ？考えられる範囲、悪いこととかしてないし、そもそも俺を見張っても得なことなんて一個もないし、青崎はいろいろ間違ってる。いや、それとも魔術師っていうのは。
Nein. Arrogant Zeshov were the worst that the harmless boy's gaze seemed to imply. Aoko felt a headache coming on. Due to his innate, easygoing persona, Soichiro had not thought to question that Aoko being a mage was out of the ordinary.
だからあんたがそういう風に誰はばかることなく私たちのことを言いふらさないかを見張ってんじゃないこの常識なし。
Aoko flew out of her chair. She had been doing her best to keep her cool, but it seemed her well-off patience had finally run dry. Witnessing Aoko snap, Soichiro clapped his hands together.
そうか。青崎が俺を殺そうとしたのは 魔術師であることを隠さなくちゃいけないからだったっけ？
Ja,
うん、それならわかる。監視するのは青崎の秘密のことで、俺の命云々はおまけみたいなものか。
そりゃ本質的に言えばそうだけど、重くてないわね、その言い方。
けど、それはあまり意味がないんじゃないか？学校もあるし、バイトだってあるんだ。一日中この家から出ないわけにはいかないんだぞ。
in an instant, Sushiro's objective had her stumped and leaving her at a loss for words. Her honestly had no idea what position he was in. To believe that he had any sort of freedom at this point was shocking to say at least.
いや、落ち着け私。話が早くなってある意味助かるし。
Orko somehow managed to compose herself. As a matter of fact, she never had any intention of imprisoning him. Stripping him of his freedom and castrating him would go against the agreement anyway. Besides, if she was going to go that far, it would be easier to just kill him. To Orko, letting him live meant she showing a modicum of respect to Sushiro's way of life.
もしかしてこの部屋から出ちゃいけないのか俺？
A leper bit on his head as he blurted out what he was thinking. It appeared he had finally got the grim message. Orko looked somewhat satisfied in his dismay.
大丈夫よ。監禁生活なんて面倒なことだけはしないから。
Correct.
あなたの自由はそれなりに考慮してあります。そのあたりのさじ加減はアリスの手腕に任せてあるから、あなたは心配しなくていいわ。
A gloomy look fell over Sushiro's face as he found his concern growing by the second.
いい？あなたの処遇はこの家に住むことを前提にした監視で、それも解決策が見つかるまでの期間限定。何でもいいから目撃者を殺すなんてことより、こっちの方がよっぽど穏便でしょ？
Das stimmt.
だいたいこれは私とあなたとの約束なんだから、いちいち文句言わないでよね。ただでさえアリスとの冷戦が続いてて頭痛いんだから。
Aber warum löscht sie nicht einfach das Gedächtnis? She sighed as she started at Sushiro's down as he lay on the bed.
けど勘違いはしないで。ここじゃあんたの地位は最下層のさらに下、番犬より下なんだから。あんたの生殺与奪はあの夜から私が握ってるんだから。あんたは私に所有されてるようなもんなの。
Warum bekomme ich jetzt Makima-Vibes?
さ、これで自分の立場分かった？
As Alice finished the declaration, Sushiro suddenly looked up the ceiling, so she would not notice his reaction. He meant no offense to Orko, but he had to hide the fact that he fundamentally disagreed with her analogy. In Sushiro's opinion, it was disrespectful to both dogs and humans to call him lower than a dog. A more accurate analogy of the power dynamic would be that of a rabbit and a wild boar, hence why he chose not to voice his opinion. Aber sorry, ich bin K.O. mit diesem für jetzt und muss noch ein bisschen Hausarbeit machen. Wollte kurz ein wenig lesen. Also speichere ich mal und mache wahrscheinlich am Freitag weiter, wenn ich die Position finde, am Freitag zu streamen. Dann mal adios und vierte. Gianni. Mata. Kinyobi? War Kinyobi Freitag? Zumindest wird Kinyobi geschrieben. Freitag auf Japanisch. Für Freitag ist es nicht. Ja, Kinyobi war Freitag. War nicht sicher, ob die Lesung von Kind benutzt wird. Weil mehrere Kanjis haben ja mehrere Bedeutungen auf Japanisch. Dann mal Adios und Vierte.